Hello. Hi, Janiqua. Hi, Jamie. Thank you for joining me. Hi, Shannon. Thank you all for being here. I am doing this live today. This is a part two of the injuries discussion I was talking about yesterday. A lot of people were asking me for a part two. So I figured what better time to have a live discussion than to have you guys ask me questions about injuries. So if you have any questions about injuries, we'll be talking about that. And I did get a question about hi JR, hi Alexandria, hi Raspberry. Thank you all for joining me. Hi Crystal. I love all the blue hearts. It just makes me so happy to see all the blue hearts. I also will be discussing about how soon you should take your exam if you have failed it, right? If you have failed one of the medical coding certification exams, the CCS, the CCA, the CCSP, or the CPC, how long you should wait, and what are some things you should think about when you are considering retaking your test and how soon you should do it. So, since we've got plenty of people already in here, we'll go ahead and get into it. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Okay, guys. So this is a live discussion tonight. This is a part two to the discussion from yesterday, which was about injuries. So if you have any specific questions about injury coding, just put them in the chat box and we will discuss that. And I'm also going to be talking about how soon to retake your medical coding certification exam if you have failed it. So I'll start with that one first. So if you have taken your medical coding certification exam, any one of the main four, the CCS, the CCA, the CCSP, or the CPC, and you have failed it, whether you have failed it by a couple of points or whether you have failed it by a few more points, the thing that you need to think about is this. Before you go rushing to take this test again, because sometimes the different associations have a different cooling off period. With AHEMA, it is a 90-day cooling off period. If you have failed the CCS, the CCA, the CCSP, you have to wait a minimum of 90 days between tests before you're eligible again to take the test. With AAPC, it is a 30-day wait in order to sit for the test again. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. If you failed it by a little bit with one of the AHEMA exams, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're fully prepared and ready to go. Now, it may be a little bit different with AAPC. However, there's a reason that you failed it. And that reason could be just that you let your nerves get the better of you, or you thought that maybe you were a little bit stronger than you were, or maybe you could use a little bit more practice. A lot of times what happens is people don't practice enough before the test, and then the day of the test, and it's just like, oh, I should have been practicing more. Or sometimes they let, the external factors around them get to them. Oh, there was too much talking, or there was too much this, too much that. If you're concentrating on your test, none of that will bother you because you're going to be so focused on your test. You don't even have time to think about even going to the bathroom, okay? You have time to only focus on what's in front of you because everything is based on time. It's about speed. These exams are between 2 hours if you're taking the CCA exam to 4 hours if you're taking the CCS, the CCSP, or the CPC. So what you need to think about is what made you fail. When you look at your results, what was it that you scored lower on? Was it, the reimbursement side? Was it the coding side? If it was the coding side, then that means that you need to spend more time practicing the coding part. If you're with AAPC and they say, well, it's 30 days in between tests, I still wouldn't jump immediately on retaking the test again in 30 days, only because if you're going to take it a second time, you want to make sure that that second approach is going to be, you're like fully prepared. So I would recommend 90 days like AHEMA, but if you want to go with a minimum of 60 days in between tests, that's okay too. you know, it is entirely up to you. But what I would recommend is 90 days. And the only reason that I say 90 days is because whether you failed it by a little bit or by a lot, these tests are going to look different when you take them again. Okay. Now, I know with AHEMA exams, it is different every single time. I have never sat for an AAPC exam, so I don't know if they have the same test or if it's a different set of tests with a different questions, you know, or whatever. But I will say that, again, you want to be prepared for that second run. So I personally would recommend 90 days in between tests if you have failed, even if you failed it by a little bit, because you want to be able to pass these tests with a few touchdowns. Now, no one cares about what your score was when you're out applying for jobs. All they care about was that you're certified and that your credential is valid. That's all they care about. That's all they want to know about. There's been times before where I've got the question of, well, I didn't do as well as I wanted to. Somebody said they made a 79 or something like that on their AAPC, CPC exam. Can they take it again? I'm like, you already passed it. And with as much money as you're spending with AAPC, why would you want to give them more just because your score was a 79? Come on, dude. You know? So I'm just saying. But yes, take those 90 days. If you're going to plan it how I would plan it, take 90 days, right? And then look at your calendar and say, okay, there's my date. I've got my date in mind. I've got it locked in. Now, sometimes there might be like a little bit of a time difference on some of these. Like if you're paying for that second, if you pay for the 2 attempts with AAPC, I don't know if there's like a certain window of time. And if there is, well, then obviously follow that window of time, but give yourself the most time in between. But look at that date and then start planning. You can plan backwards if you like on how much and what you're going to study. I still recommend studying 20 hours per week. Now, if you do that, at least you're going to be able to guarantee that you're going to have a lot more confidence by the time you walk in for that second test, because you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it hurts to think about like, oh, I could have almost done it. I almost did it. But guys, these things happen. Not every single time is going to be a win every single time. And just because you don't pass it one time, it doesn't mean that you're not going to pass it the next attempt. You know, so that's why I say don't be too down on yourself if that's what happened. I mean, it just happens. It's part of the whole process of shaping the coder. But what does this say when you are saying, no, I'm not going to take this defeat. I'm going to run at it again. It says that you're a fighter. And that's what this industry needs. It needs fighters. It needs people who are going to say, okay, I didn't get it right the first time, but I'm going to try again and I'm going to try harder this time. And then I'm going to get what I want. And then you build yourself to be a stronger coder. You build yourself to be a more knowledgeable coder. And trust me, that's really what the industry needs, because, you know, a lot of students are not as confident as they should be when they finished school and when they're taking their certification exams, because, you know, did they learn everything? And then everything is independently learned with medical coding, which makes it even harder, you know. So if you really want this, you really have to want this. You really have to want being in the field. You really have to want being in this industry, because it's not going to be given to you. It won't. And this industry will fight you. It will fight you at every single chance it gets, whether it is taking the test or whether it is out there finding your first job. This industry will put you through your paces. Okay. So start looking at the calendar, get your date that you want to take your test, and plan it out. If you know you're going to have to take time off of work, because that's what I did. I took a couple days off of work beforehand, so that way I didn't have anything from work distracting me. I had stopped my calendar for resumes and tutoring at that time, and I was just like, okay, I'm not going to focus on anything but what I want to just be at peace. Because of the few days before, I didn't do anything because I said I'm not going to learn anything new the couple of days before my test. I just want my mind to be clear. And that's what I did. I relaxed. I watched my favorite shows, and the morning of my test, I took my time getting up, and I went and got breakfast at Wendy's, which is unusual. I don't always get breakfast at Wendy's, but I wanted breakfast at Wendy's that morning, and I came home, I ate my breakfast, I watched Monk, and I was making sure that I was relaxed before I went in for my test. And, that's when I took my test, and there you go. But you have to be kind to your body as well as your mind the time before you're taking this test. Because if you can get to the point where, okay, I practice, and I'm just gonna get in there, and we're gonna pass this test. And once you go in there with that mindset and that attitude, it's gonna go a long way to, okay, we've got this. And it's not that you go in there and you have that attitude and magically you pass. No, you're working for it. So that's the thing that you have to think about too, is that you're working for it. And all these 20 hours per week up until that point is going to be, okay, we're doing this. So, and that's what, 12 weeks. So that's not long, guys. It really isn't long. It's just the 3 months, right? 90 days. So let me see what I got here. What did I miss? All right. Blue Hearts. Hi, Regina. Terrio. I hope I said that right. Thank you for the blue hearts. Glad everyone's back tonight. Yes, me too. Alexandria says, I practiced a lot, but I let my own doubt and second questioning myself hurt me the first time, but not the second time. Hi, Miss Happiness. Alexandria says, I did my second time within 4 months, I think, and that was pushing it. Oh, there you go. That's what everyone used to say in college. JR says, I was considering taking it in 4 to 6 weeks, but reconsidered it earlier today. Okay, well, good. You take your time then, Yes, keeping that positivity. Jane says, thank you for your help. You're so welcome. Jane says, I love medical coding, the words, and learning the different medical specialty rules. Providers do not know this. Marking your books. No. I don't recommend it, but JR says, I get concerned about scheduling tests, and the area gets bad weather in my area, and the winters get brutal. Is that Shantia? I hope it's right. Shantia, I don't know. But hello. Yeah, well, that is something to think about, because we're in September. We're already going to be in October, November, December, January. Yeah, I could see that. I could see how that would make you a little uncomfortable there. Because, yeah, the winters can be pretty bad up there, especially during January time frame. So, I mean, it's up to you. It's whatever you want to do, however you want to set your test up. When I took my test, I mean, I'm in Texas, so, I mean, we still get wacky weather anyway. And I will say this, when I was originally scheduled to take my CCSP test, because that was first test that I took in 2021, right? I had it scheduled for the week that we had that horrible ice storm here in Texas, where we were all inside for 8 days. So it was such a bad winter storm. But by the time, the storm had passed, and then everything was, melting, and, people were getting outside of their homes, my test was automatically canceled by Pearson VUE, because they said that they had a pipe bust or something like that. So they weren't able to accommodate the exams. So I had to reschedule. So they gave me another week to get in there and take my exam. But that was nerve-wracking as it was, because of course we had the storm and everything else. But that was a freak occurrence, and hopefully that stays a freak occurrence, because no. Bleu does not do ice. Not on the road. I'll do it in my drink, but I will not do ice on the road. I'm just saying. Terriel says, I'm attending a technical college, and I'm very excited about starting to learn about it. I feel it might be challenging at times, but I'm ready for it. And it is, it is. Medical coding involves knowing what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. That's how serious it is. And now, don't let that overwhelm you. Don't let it scare you. I'm just trying to prepare you. I know I scare a lot of people sometimes. and I don't mean to. It's not that I'm trying to scare people off. I'm just trying to get y'all prepared, because a lot of times people are not prepared for what they're walking into. They see, oh, this is exciting, and then they get sold a program. Somebody commented earlier, they said that they're so excited because they're in a 16-week program, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And they're brand new to this, and I'm like, you can't learn this in 16 weeks. You can't. 4 months to learn medical terminology, anatomy, pathophysiology, ICD-10-CM, CPT, and heaven forbid you learn ICD-10-PCS as well. HCPCS, HIPAA, high tech, OIG, modifiers, evaluation and management. Let's see. Present on admission, MSDRGs, DRGs, medical billing, the electronic medical record. You have to learn all of these things in 16 weeks. Okay. No, that's too much. It's too much. And it's very hard to see people get into programs like that, because I know what they're about to go into, and that's very rough. It's very rough. It takes somebody who's really committed, and it doesn't matter what your medical background is, even if you have medical background, because sometimes nurses say, oh, well, I got into the 16-week program, I should be able to get it, no big deal, I passed the NCLEX. And these are the same nurses that come back to me later and say, Bleu, this was harder than the NCLEX. I know it is. They have told me before that it's harder. I've never sat for the NCLEX, but I've from what I've seen on Instagram, it's quite difficult. But knowing medical coding is also quite difficult. Just saying. Shantia says, I'm currently taking classes for my CCA, and I'm watching your videos. It's keeping me motivated, although I'm going to struggle a little bit more with ICD-10 PCS. I pray this works. JR says, if it goes over 90 days, I'll stay sharp on studying. One advantage of cold weather is the incentive to stay inside and cuddle with coding books. What better way to spend an evening, I think, right? Jamie says, real world coding is way different from medical coding school. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And the thing that you can do, Shantia, to prepare yourself for that CCA and working with the ICD-10 PCS is it depends on which coding book that you have for ICD-10 PCS. So if you have the Optum, this is not an ad for Optum, but y'all know how much I love Optum. If you have this book, in the back of this book, the Optum ICD-10 PCS Expert Edition, it has Appendix M like in Mary, and it has 388, I believe that's the count, 388 procedures to look up. And that's what you do. You start by looking up all of those procedures, because that's what I did when I studied for the CCS back in 2021. And I'm telling you, that's having that practice and getting so used to the book, it was what really helped me. And it's only 388. And you may feel like in the beginning when you start doing it, like you're working through some of those, like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting any of these approaches, or I'm always off by one. I'm always off by one digit, because you have 7 digits to screw up. Really, when you think about it, you have 7 digits to screw up. So it's real easy in the beginning to get discouraged, because like you're trying to look up these procedures, you're trying to understand the approaches, and is it extirpation? Is it removal? And it's never removal, by the way. It seems like it though. It's never removal though, I feel. And then is it, what is it? So you're trying to learn those things, and the best way to learn them is to actually practice looking up the procedures that it involves, because then you'll start to like associate different procedures with different things, right? And so the only way you're going to be able to do that is to get your practice. And rather than to think about it like, oh my gosh, PCS is so difficult. When I was studying for this exam in 2021 for the CCS, I do not have inpatient coding experience. My career has always been in the outpatient side. And I started off with the CCA. And the CCA, I mean, of course, it tests you on inpatient and outpatient coding. But the time that I took the CCA exam, it was an ICD-9 time. So the books looked a little bit different, okay? And so without dating myself too much on that, I got my career going in the outpatient side. you know, so I had no need for PCS at all, you know. And at the time I didn't have time for the volume 3, which was what the equivalent is. And so when I got into we started getting the training for ICD-10-CM and PCS in 2014 before it went live in 2015. October 2015 is when ICD-10-CM and PCS went live. I didn't have anybody to show me, and I wasn't as evolved back then when it came to like learning this and learning that. I had it. I had my CCA. I was very happy. I had my aha moment. I finally understood it. And I'm like, I'm on the outpatient side. What do I want to mess around with the inpatient side? But I didn't have the channel yet. And I didn't have a growing audience that told me, hey, why don't you know, I have this question about this, you know, can you help me? And I'm like scrambling, trying to help them figure it out. And I'm learning at the same time too. And so I was like, okay, no, this has got to stop because I need to know. I need to know this stuff. And so I would do live shows almost every night in 2021. And I would be talking on the show. These shows would go on for about an hour, sometimes a little over an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours almost sometimes. The conversation gets going. What are you going to do? Right? So I would be having these conversations with you guys, and then I would cut the show and I would, you know, turn off, you know, everything. And then I would go and I would start practicing with the book. And there was many a night where I was practicing with this ICD-10 PCS book, not this year, obviously, this one version. But at the time, I was using my PCS book from Optum. And there was many times where I just like wanted to throw things because I wasn't getting it. I didn't understand it. I'm like, why don't I get this? And so what I would do when I didn't understand how to code it for a particular procedure was I would look at the answer key, which is also included with the Appendix M. I would look at the answer key and then I would be like, oh, okay, you know, so this word means this, and I can associate this kind of procedure with this. And it makes more sense when you look at it this way. So that was how I started to practice that. And once I got it, I was like, okay, I know that approach, I know that approach, I know that approach. And so it became much more easier to go over. But it is not always easy to understand the approaches. And they do really want you to have that advanced knowledge when you're working on the inpatient side, but it's not impossible. You just have to be patient enough to build up your knowledge base. And I started studying heavily for the CCS between, it was at the beginning of April all the way till October, because I took my test in November and that was when I passed it. So all those months in between, I was doing that. And I was getting better and better at it. But at first I was really slow. And I was like, man, I'm barely getting any of these done. But I started to pick up the pace because I started to learn. And you'll learn the more you practice. Practice, practice, practice. So, all right. JR says, what is the opinion of the Optum clinical documentation book? I hope it's positive because the book is arriving tomorrow, along with the PCS and diagnosis desk reference. So the clinical documentation book from Optum is really kind of helping you to understand where the potential holes could be in documentation. So sometimes there's not always specificity, especially when they're talking about like sepsis coding. So that's where they're going to talk about some of those things in that clinical documentation book, right? Improvement book. So that's what that book is designed for. So it's designed for those that are trying to help providers to understand that there are more specific diagnoses that are available, that sometimes you don't have to write things in such generic terms, because sometimes some doctors will think that they don't need to write all of this detail because they think the coders won't understand or the insurance won't understand, and they don't have time to explain it. So they're going to put it in the most plain terms as possible. Meanwhile, there's very critical data that is being missed because this provider is not documenting all the detail like they should. So will it help you? Of course. Do you really have to concentrate on that right now, especially when you're trying to study for the exam? Not really. but you can use it to augment your studies later on if you want to. But for right now, I think that if you are going to practice for the exams, that you need to really kind of focus on more with working with your coding books than working with the CDI, because the CDI is going to be a little bit more in depth for later on. It's not a bad thing that you got it now, because it's a good deal right now, and it certainly doesn't hurt to get it and to read it. But like I said, the priority should be with the coding and practicing with the coding. Just my advice. Let's see. And of course, the diagnosis desk reference is amazing. It is a really good book. The diagnosis desk reference, the coder desk reference for diagnoses from Optum, you can find that at optumcoding.com. OPTUM coding, CODING, .com, optumcoding.com. When you look at the coder desk reference for diagnoses, what this is an explanation of these diagnoses codes. So it has all of the diagnosis codes in there, and it has just basically like a layman's description of what it is. It's like plantar fasciitis. Well, when you look at the code M722, right? I believe that's the code, M722. It'll say plantar fascial fibromatosis, which is another condition altogether. And plantar fasciitis is something completely different. However, that book says that plantar fascial fibromatosis covers plantar fasciitis, and there's no specific code for plantar fasciitis, because it'll give you that plantar fascial fibromatosis code. So, but it'll tell you things like that. And then it'll explain, of course, all the Z codes and stuff like that. And so it's very helpful, and it's great. It's a great reference tool, especially if you are being audited. That's a wonderful tool to have with you. I know I had to have that several times with me because sometimes these auditors don't know. And so you have to show them it's something that is reputable. And the coder desk reference is reputable. Just saying. Let's see. Alexandria says, I never learned anything about ICD-10 PCS in school or through AAPC. Well, I mean, they have a different program for their CIC, the Certified Inpatient Coder with AAPC. Now, there's some employers that will look for the CIC, but most of them are going to be looking for the CCS or the CCA. And so that's why, I mean, sometimes with these programs, it's all about what can we teach you the fastest. And in that case, it would be the outpatient coding. That's why you would learn more about CPT and why you don't hardly ever learn about PCS, because PCS is only if you're going to take the CCA, the CCS, or the CIC, right? Because those are the three that cover ICD-10 PCS coding. But like I said, if you're taking the CCSP or if you're taking the CPC, that's all outpatient. And it's easier to teach new people outpatient coding than it is to teach them inpatient coding. It just takes a little bit more experience on that inpatient side, as far as knowing what certain things mean and being really proficient with anatomy and medical terminology. Just saying. All right. So Alexandria says, I'm intrigued to learn about it now that I'm certified and can let my brain learn something new. Yes. Okay. Your advice is the coder's version of the wisdom of Solomon. That's funny. Thank you, JR. Alexandria says, that's good to know. I wasn't sure what the differences were in the books or in the credentials. Because what you have, even with the CPC, like the inpatient coders can be with the CPC. I mean, it really all depends on that facility and if they're willing to train the people to code for PCS. If they are, then that's something different. There's some places that are like that. They say, okay, even if you have a CPC, will train you on the job to do ICD-10 PCS because they're so desperate that they need people. And so that does happen, guys. I mean, not everything is black and white. When you see these job listings and you see that they say that, oh, well, candidate must have 3 to 5 years experience. If you let that run you off from ever applying, then you'll never apply for any place, right? And I want to say something else too. So I talk about applying with a temp agency. Now, when I think temp agency, I think a local place that you go to, not these fly-by-night type staffing people, right? And you'll see some of these staffing agencies. I'm not going to name any. I'm not naming names, okay? I'm not naming names. I don't like them, number one. I don't like these companies that mass hire coders all the time. Like, they look like they can't keep coders. And why? Because a lot of them have like contracts and things like that specifically for coding. And they have all kinds of weird requirements. They want you to have 3 to 5 years and all this stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. That is a staffing agency. And yes, while temp agencies are technically staffing agencies, it's a little different because those guys that do the staffing agencies, and you'll see them on LinkedIn, they are constantly posting, oh, we have this $1,000 sign-on bonus, we have all of these things, and we have 401k and benefits, and we're looking for inpatient coders with 3 to 5 years experience. I'm not talking about those YOs. I'm talking about the people like in your town, in your city, that you can go to. And it's not Kelly Services. Kelly Services is more like day labor and stuff like that. It's not like those. So in my hometown, there was a staffing agency, and there's staffing agencies for these all over the US. And so that's why I tell you, Google in your hometown, staffing, temporary agencies for medical professionals. This one in my hometown is woman owned, and they were like, oh, you know, we staff all kinds of medical positions, from CNAs, LVNs, LPNs, medical coders, medical billers. And so that was how I was able to get in, because they have a specific market that they are targeting in that area in order to hire people. So they're not like these people that you see on LinkedIn with all of these flashy things that are always hiring people and expecting them to have 3 to 5 years experience. I'm not talking about those folks. I'm talking about the people that you can find on Google. Okay. So that's something that should be clear. And the other thing is this: if you don't want to take my advice, or if my advice doesn't seem like it's working for you, what are you doing? Okay. Because that's why I'm explaining when I'm telling you guys, Google, because I know this lady did not Google. I know she didn't, because of the way that she wrote her, whatever she wrote. I just deleted it because it's just like, whatever, lady. If you don't pay attention to what I'm saying, which is to Google in your area, temporary agencies for medical professionals, then you'll see all of those that pop up. And they will be for companies that are in your local area, not on the national scale, always trying to hire people and they can't keep people because they have poor leadership. Not those places. I'm talking about the places that are local. And you'll see that they have like positions like for local hospitals in your area, or maybe they get contracts. You know, the company that I originally worked for, they had gotten a contract, and that was how I got my second job. I left my first job when I did not get it, right? When they told us, there's going to be 3 of you who work here. You're going to take care of this backlog for 3 months. And then after 3 months, then we'll send you, you know, to another job. You know, it may or may not be coding. But then they said, well, you know, we just got this contract. It's going to be for 5 years, but you have to move. Now, I had to move. Don't tell me that you can't move. That is so irritating. I'm telling you my story. I moved, but not everybody has to. Okay. Some people just get lucky, and that's how they get their job. They go to the temp agency, they put their resume on file, and then if there's an opportunity that comes up, then they get the call that says, hey, you know, there's an opportunity for these folks at this hospital for this amount of time. Will you take it? It's not going to be for a day. It will be for a contracted amount of time. And that's just for you to get your experience in. Because these temp agencies will know that you don't have experience, and they don't require experience because that's not what they're there for. They're there to fill a seat with a qualified individual. And sometimes these local organizations, these local hospitals or doctor's offices, they will go through the temp agency because the temp agency is going to do all the vetting. They're going to give you the tinkle test, tinkle, if you know what I mean. They'll give you the tinkle test. They'll make sure that you have all of, all the things that are required to work at that facility, okay? And then they will give you a test to make sure that you are competent. And once you pass all these things, you say, okay, well, we have this candidate who is certified and they have all of the requirements to work at your facility. Now, they may not have all the experience, and they don't even have to say that. The agency just wants somebody to send somebody over. Because guess what? If it doesn't work out for you, they can just send in another person. So that's what these employers know. But then some of these employers are going to try before they buy. They don't want to have to go through all of the tinkle tests and all of the assessment tests and all this other stuff. They want somebody to get in there. Can we test this person out to see if they will get along with their coworkers, if they'll like the environment, if they want to be there, if they have a positive attitude, if they can do their own research? Then we'll hire them on. And that does happen. That does happen. But again, there's a lot of people out there that want to have these blinders on that says, oh no, I want to get, a remote job right away. I want to work part-time. I only want to do this and I only want to do that. Again, if you're setting up these stipulations of what you want to do and you haven't earned it yet, there's a good chance you're not going to get very far unless you give the universe its opportunities to be able to present to you by showing up, by applying with these temp agencies and saying, okay, well, I'll take this position to start with, because where you start is obviously not always going to be your forever home. The place that I started was not my forever home. The second place I worked was not my forever home. The third place I worked is my forever home. And I've been here ever since then. I've been here since 2009. So I have 14 years. That is the majority of my 15-year career has been here. So I'm just saying. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you for joining me. Hi, Elizabeth. Well, as long as you keep studying, you'll be okay, Ms. Elizabeth. What CPC Blue book on your table? Thanks, Chris. All right. This is the one that I always recommend. This is the CPC certification study guide. You can use this even if you are taking an AHIMA exam. Let me repeat that. You can use this even though you are taking the CCA, the CCS, or the CCSP. Now, why? Blue, it says CPC on the front of the book. Guess what? When you open it, we're all the same, guys. We're all the same. They use the same exact CPT book that we use. Everybody uses the same CPT book. Everybody uses the same CPT code set. This book is chock full of scenarios and just very easy to understand breakdown. The AAPC got this right. They did. Now, I used to be able to find this book for $10. I cannot find this book for $10 no more. And people blame me because they said, well, you always recommend it. But this is a really good book for understanding CPT. Do I recommend the ones by AHIMA? No, because I feel, I'm a book connoisseur, guys. I love books. I feel that the way that those books are written is not helpful for new people. This type of book and the way that it's written is helpful for people. And look at this. It's not intimidating, but it does pack a punch because you do have to work through all of it. And it's all the chapters. It covers everything, right? And if you get the latest, it's going to give you the latest about E&M. This one is quite dated. What it talks about in E&M is already outdated, long outdated. But if you want to learn about E&M, do I have it? Hold on. I'm letting y'all write this down. So, in case you're writing it down, even though it is in the description box, this is the one you want if you want to learn about evaluation and management. So this comes from Optum, optumcoding.com, OPTUM. This is a question and answer book, and it explains everything from all of the types of settings, from office outpatient to the ER to any of those. And this book is like $26, I think. I can't remember. On Optum, and it's free shipping. Okay, because this is the 2023 edition. And you can use this to practice with. You can use this to help you to understand more about evaluation and management. This is the most comprehensive book that's up to date about E&M that I can recommend. Because again, I love Optum, and they have the answer keys back here as well to their questions. They have the appendixes. Let's see. They have their glossary that has all the medical terms in it and stuff. And see there? Look at that. See, they have questions and answers. So that's the thing, guys. I mean, Optum is full of really helpful books. And they talk about like the documentation requirements, which is really good to have, especially if you are trying to train your providers. This is a really good book to familiarize yourself with, so that way you know what to tell them. And it's not like you're just telling them something foreign, you know. Whenever I have, they have those evaluation and management tools, right? And so whenever I've given those to any of my providers, they're like, this is very busy, Blue. It's a very busy thing. And I said, okay, that's why I'm here to explain it to you. So I break down the explanation of what straightforward means. What does low medical decision making mean? What does moderate medical decision making mean? What does high medical decision making mean? And they're like, wow, I didn't know that that's what was involved. And I said, yes, this is how we determine what your level is going to be with evaluation and management, by going through this tool and by seeing what you've documented. So if you're not telling me that you ordered a medication, Blue, that's just common sense. I said, you know what they say about assumptions, right? And they go, Blue, and I'm just saying, okay? You can't assume that I know. And you always want to make sure that this stuff is documented, even though you say, well, the orders are right there. I can't go off your orders thing. You've got to be able to tell me, because what happens if I don't have access to your orders thing, right? Because I have access to only the note that you have in front of me. I don't have access to all the things that you can see. So I can go based on the documentation that you have there in the document, okay? You can't expect me to know that I have to go here and I have to go there. You don't know what you don't know, right? And they're like, well, yeah, you're right. Oh, you know? And so that's how you get to talking and having that conversation. Because I've had many providers who have left my facility, and they still call me. And they're like, Blue, why don't my coders talk to me? I said, I don't know. I said, if I was there, I would encourage them to go and talk to you because you're awesome. And they're like, well, yes, but they don't say anything. And I end up on a hit list. I end up on this list of bad people who are messing up on their notes, or they forgot to do something. Why am I on this list? I don't know. And I said, did you forget what I taught you? And they go, no, it's just, and I said, okay. So, but have you tried to reach out to the coder too? Well, and they're at home. And I go, well, you can always say to your clinic administrator, hey, I want to see the coders here for a day. I want them to come in and give us a class. You can ask for that. They go, well, it's not that easy, Blue. And I go, well, I know that. But if the coder is not making the effort, which I've always encouraged people who work at home to make an effort to go to the facility if you're in the area and set up a meeting so that you can see each other face to face. There's nothing worse than getting emails from somebody who has never met you, right? Doesn't know anything about your personality, doesn't know anything about who you are, what you look like, doesn't know anything about you, but yet is telling you that you're doing something wrong. And sometimes it may not even be meant to come off that way, but some coders don't write very eloquently, right? And so then when they write it, it sounds a little bit harsh. And so then, of course, the provider gets on the defensive because who are you? How dare you question me? I've been to medical school. I've got all these degrees and I know all this stuff. And what do you have? A certification? Who are you? So that's why you have to make it both ways. Both ways. And you can't expect them to come chasing you down. Some will, but a lot of them will not. So you have to be the one who's more engaging. You have to be the one to make the first move sometimes. Because I was like a lot of you thinking, oh, these doctors, they don't want to hear from me. That was before I was evolved. So I said, they don't want to talk to me. They don't want to know anything I know, until one day. So I'm sitting in my office and I have a partner at the time, and we're both sitting there, and there's this he's not a clinic administrator, he's a hospital administrator, which means he's over the hospital. And so his specific job, this guy was a schmoozer, okay? So his job was to make the doctors happy. And how were they going to be happy? What was it that they needed? So it was his job to go from clinic to clinic, finding out what these doctors needed to get with his other hospital administrator buddies to get the funding for whatever, or get the programs going for whatever, so that these doctors would be happy and more producing and make more and do more things, right? So he comes into our office. I didn't know who this guy was. I had gotten back from leave and I was just like sitting at my desk, and my partner was like, hey, Blue, there's this guy walking around. He's been talking to everybody, but I just ignore him. He's just a schmoozer. He just talks. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So I'm sitting there and I'm working. And so then this guy comes to the door, the hospital administrator. He's like, hey, good morning, ladies. How are you? And I'm like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. And he's like, oh, yeah, I met your partner. He goes, but you weren't here. He goes, so it's nice to meet you. He goes, so which one of you is the coder for a particular doctor in my clinic? I said, oh, yeah, that's me. And then he's like, oh, well, I said, why? What's wrong? And he's like, well, he says that you don't talk to him. And he said, what now? He said, no, he says you don't talk to him. He said that he would like some more communication with you. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, he says you don't talk to him and that he doesn't know if he's coding right or not, or documenting properly. I said, oh, no. I said, sir, I'm sorry, I don't know you. I said, but I will say this. I have emailed this fella several times. And I said, his documentation is great. I've even told him in these emails that his documentation is wonderful and that thank you, for, whatever. When he responds to a query, if I send a query, I always say, if there's any other questions or if I can be of further assistance, let me know. Well, he doesn't like email. And I said, well, he could have told me this. I'm right around the corner from him. And he's like, well, that's what he told me. And I said, you know what? I said, excuse me. And he goes, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to go surf this out right now. And I said, because no, you're not going to sit there and tell other people that I don't talk to you and I don't give you feedback, because I have. And so he goes, well, Blue. And I said, I'll be back. So I go, and he was in his office too. And I see him, he's over there working and, doing his thing, and he's just, sitting there looking at this, and he's real pensive looking at a x-ray and stuff like that. He goes, hi, and he's all smiling. And I said, I heard from a little birdie, and I said it just like that. I said, I heard from a little birdie that we have a problem with our communication. And he goes, oh, wait, no. He goes, I was just telling him, and I said, so you know what I'm talking about? I said, yeah. He goes, I was just telling him that, you don't tell me if I'm doing good or not. I said, sir, I said, all the emails that I've sent you before, he goes, you don't email me that much. And I go, but he says that you don't like email. And I didn't know that you want more feedback. I said, if you want feedback, I don't know if there's anything I can give you. I said, because you do really well on your notes and I'm able to code your stuff quickly. He goes, I think there's still more I can do to improve. And I go, so you want me to look for things that are wrong? And he goes, it's not that I want you to look for things that are wrong, but maybe we could have some more discussions. And I'm like, if that's all you wanted, I said, that is totally fine. He goes, really? And I go, yes. If you want that, that is totally fine. I said, I know eventually one day you will leave this facility and you will go off and be in private practice or work for some other group. And I said, when you do that, you need to be prepared with all the things about coding that you should know and documentation. He's like, okay. And so then after that, we started talking more and more. And I started making more efforts to be like, okay, well, I saw this and what's going on here? And he's like, okay, well, and then so he starts to explain things. I go, okay, see, this is not there. You know, he's like, well, I didn't think that that was important, or we don't get paid for that. And I said, who told you that? He goes, well, I heard it from a buddy. I go, okay, I'm your coder. All coding advice needs to come from me, okay? I said, I'm making efforts to learn this stuff. I said, not your buddies. What goes on at your buddies' facilities may not always apply to us. And they may have different rules based on insurance at their facility. He's like, yeah, you're right. And I said, yeah. So if you have a coding question, you need to let me know about it. And he's like, okay, okay. And so you start, communicating better. But that's how the doors open. See, had that hospital administrator not come in there and told me, I would have never have known. And then this provider's running around thinking that I'm not communicating because I don't want to, right? Because I don't want to, because he never hears from me. And that's what they will say about you. And so ever since then, whenever I have these classes, I always say, now this is one thing y'all will never be able to say about me is that I am inaccessible, because I am always accessible. I said, when I'm here in the facility, which is every single day, y'all know where my office is. And I said, now when I'm out and about, I said, y'all can stop me. And they do. They stop me. They'll see me walking in the hallway on my way to the printer or something like that. Hey, Blue, I got a question. And they know. And I said, but it's a two-way street. I can't read your mind. So I don't know if something that I'm saying doesn't make sense to you. And then sometimes they have to tell me, slow down, Blue, you're speaking coder. So I said, okay. I said, let me explain it in another way, But these are the kinds of interactions that you'll have when you make the effort. Okay, so that's just what I'm saying about those things, guys. It's a different experience once you get in. But when you're getting in, that's when you start learning to communicate. And your professional communication, of course, increases. And your emotional intelligence increases because you start to learn how to read your providers, and you start to learn how to read them in a way that you're going to be able to know if they grasp what you're saying or not. Because sometimes they will not grasp what you're saying, but they'll tell you that they understand. And then you got to look at the audience. Is there other providers around, or are there other providers around them? And if there are, then that means you got to catch that provider when there's not a big crowd, and when you and that provider can talk, because they may not want to admit in front of a group of their peers that they don't understand what you're saying. Okay? So there's always those pockets to be able to get those opportunities for better communication. I'm just saying. Alexandria, yes. Spoiled. Absolutely. All right. So let's see. Uh-oh. I see a sad face. What did I miss? All right. Alexander says, I got my evaluation and management coding advisor book from Optum. Yay! It's next to my bed. JR says, I'm surprised Optum doesn't have a version of the study guide. The E&M book is good. Unfortunately, I only got the book only 2 weeks before my exam. Mike says, I failed the first attempt at CCS and now understand how this is a systematic issue. I don't have coding experience, yet you can't get a job without certification, yet the exam is for a coder with experience, because there's a CCA, okay? So the CCA is your entry level. You just went for the big one. And it's understandable. A lot of people want that one because that's what the employers are looking for. It sounds like you just probably need a little bit more time with the studying, Dee Dee says, hi everyone, I need tips on how to start studying. I finished coding school last year. Mike says, it's very difficult exam for someone new to coding. Yes, it is. Um, thank you, Crystal. JR says that he loves his book too. um, thank you, Alexandria. And JR says, you can do it, Mike. That is awesome. I love to see y'all encourage each other. Yep. Alexandra says, if you guys fail it the first time, try again. Yep. um, all right. Yeah. That's amazing that the doctors are comfortable with you and treat you as an equal. Even doctors have insecurities. They do. They do. And, it bothers them if you don't give them feedback. And it really does matter to them what you think of them. So here's another one. So these are some of my most favorite stories to tell. I love these stories because I love the interaction. And once you get it in your mind that these guys are not as intimidating as you might think they are at first, because I was intimidated. I think that was a big part of my problem was the very first meeting that we had with them. We're actually in the clinic too, and we have an office there. And my partner and I, again, I wasn't as evolved back then either. So we're in this room, and these doctors, we're all around the same age. Okay, now my partner was older than all of us, but we're all around the same age. So she's like, oh, you kids, she would say that. And I was like, okay, we're all 30 somethings at the time, And so we're giving this class, and this was going to be our first class together, giving, to this group of providers. And so my partner was like, I started like hyperventilating because I was just like, oh my gosh, I would see all of them coming in. And it's not like I hadn't given a class before, but I hadn't given a class in such a smaller setting, where they're like right there. I'm used to like there's a little bit of space, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not so used to like they're right there and you can touch them. And so I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I can't do this. I can do this. She goes, yes, you can. You'll be okay. And I'm like, I don't know if I can. I said, I'm like, I'm getting really nervous, and I'm just like starting to stutter. She's like, Blue, it's going to be fine. It's going to be just fine. And so she was like so relaxed, and she was just like, I'll start off, and then I'll look at you, and then if you feel comfortable, you can pick it up. And if not, I'll just keep talking, and I'll keep looking at you until you're ready. So I said, okay, we'll do that. And so I'm just like, okay, breathe. And I'm like, okay, everything's cool. And so then we start like having this conversation, and then they start asking questions. And then my partner was like, can you help me? And I was like, yeah. So I would answer the question. And so once I started doing that, it was a lot easier. And I was like, okay, I can do this. So when it was my turn to speak, then I was like, okay. So then at first I was a little nervous, and then I was okay, the rest of the time. So then I was just my regular self and making them laugh and, making jokes and stuff like that, but being, of course, on the topic. And so then at the end of the class, they were like, okay, well, this was awesome. We're going to have to keep doing this. We're going to make this a monthly thing so that way we can make sure that our coding improves. Okay, cool. And then I hear, hey, don't you drive? And then he said the name of this other sports car that I do not have. And then I said, no. I said, no, that's not mine. And he's like, no, I saw you. And he's like, you, and I said, no, what I drive. And I told him what I drove, the little sports car. And then they were like, wow. They go, how fast does it go? So we started talking about cars. Well, and then my partner's looking at me. I'm not paying attention because I'm talking about cars. I love fast cars. There's two things I love is books and fast cars, And so we started talking about cars and stuff like that. And they were like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, I don't, there's a certain class of car that I do not drive on principle, And so they were all laughing about that. Well, that opened the doors to more communication, because the next time that I went back into the hallway with the surgeons, I had a new surgeon to greet. And then the doctor that was asking me about my car, he was like, hey, tell him about your car. And I was like, oh. And I was like, she has a name. And he's like, really, what's the name? And I said, her name is Sasha. And then he goes, ooh, he goes, Sasha. He goes, rare. So we were talking about my car and how fast it goes, and if I've ever broken certain speed limits. It's, no, I don't. She's never broken 100. But they're like, you don't take her out to the track. I go, I'm afraid to take her to the track. I don't want to take her to the track. So but we started talking about engine power and stuff like that. Then that little bit of conversation loosened up the new provider, because he was kind of nervous, but he was okay, just really nervous. And then he starts asking me coding questions. Well, that just, again, opened the door for more conversation. And then when you have something that can connect you, that's the best thing in the world, but you have to try, and sometimes it just happens by accident like that. But, what are you going to do? So, but some of the best times were, talking with them and getting that elevated sense of, okay, this is what we have to do, and it makes work fun. It does. And they learn things. And when they start shining on a bigger scale amongst the other clinics in the hospital, well, we know that they're the best performing. They're some of the highest performing. They just walk around with puffed chest and they're like, yeah, we did that because their documentation is good, And then when I have outside auditors telling me that their documentation is good, I said, hello. They go, how'd you do it? I go, I have to constantly talk to them. That's what they want. So that's what they get, But they get their coding tip of the week, which is a short email. And I haven't been doing it in the past few weeks because, we have issues with our new electronic medical record. But when I do this, they I can tell who reads them and who doesn't read them, because sometimes some providers won't read them. And so I have to go over there and, check on them and see, oh, I meant to read it. I said, I'm sure you did. But they, when they get to reading them, you can tell, because you'll see the detail come out in the notes. And that's how you get them to, you're not constantly on them, but you're still present. And when you're present, that makes all the difference in the world. Because like I said, for those providers that don't get that feedback, they don't know. They think they're doing right. And then they get that rude awakening later on that they weren't so right after all. And unfortunately, they learn that too late. So this is why I say you got to talk to these providers. Even if they are gruff with you, and even if they get upset with you, because they may yell and scream, because I've been yelled and screamed at before myself. You just have to be like, okay, whatever. Water off a duck's back, because they're not yelling at you. They're yelling about the fact that they didn't know. And that's the one thing they don't like, because this is the one thing that is difficult to understand is the coding. And they even struggle with it, and they're doctors. So I'm just saying. So with that said, I think I'm going to have to close this up, because I'm already at an hour, and I try to make sure that I, keep this about an hour. Let's see. Alexandria says, that's amazing. Yes. Are you a Chevy girl? I am a Chevy girl. That I will say, I am a Chevy girl. All right, guys. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But thank you guys so much for joining me on this very surprising live. We didn't even talk about injuries, did we? We sure didn't. You see, y'all were supposed to keep me on task. So I think I'll probably make a video about that where I'm talking about injuries a little bit more. I don't know. I'll see for next week. Anyway, with that said, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you so much, guys. If the video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.